In our modern world, we are surrounded by convenience. A simple flick of a switch brings light to the darkest room. A turn of a faucet delivers clean running water directly into our homes. Food is just a short drive away, neatly packaged and waiting for us on brightly lit grocery store shelves. We have become so accustomed to this ease of life that we rarely stop to think about the complex systems that make it all possible. We trust that the power grid will stay on, the water will keep flowing, and the supply chains will remain unbroken. This trust, while comfortable, can also create a dangerous sense of complacency, a forgotten vulnerability that our ancestors knew all too well. But what happens when those systems fail? What do we do when the lights go out and stay out? History is filled with stories of people who faced such challenges without the benefit of our modern technology. They didn't have GPS, online tutorials, or emergency services on speed dial. What they had was something far more valuable and enduring: knowledge. They possessed a deep practical understanding of the world around them. They knew how to read the land, how to find sustenance where others saw nothing, and how to build shelter with their own two hands. This knowledge was not a hobby, it was the very key to their existence, passed down from one generation to the next. The skills of our forefathers are not just relics of a bygone era, dusty and irrelevant in our high-tech age. They are timeless lessons in resilience, ingenuity, and self-reliance. They represent a fundamental connection to the natural world that many of us have lost. We often look forward, searching for the next technological solution to our problems, but sometimes the most profound answers lie in looking back. The wisdom of those who came before us is a powerful resource, a blueprint for survival that has been tested by the harshest conditions imaginable. In this exploration, we will turn our attention to 5 distinct groups, each a pillar of survival wisdom. These groups, separated by time and circumstance, all share a common thread of incredible resilience. When we think of the Amish, we often picture horse-drawn buggies and people living a life detached from modern convenience. But this image only scratches the surface of a deeply resilient culture. Their way of life is not a rejection of the world out of ignorance, but a deliberate choice guided by their religious beliefs to prioritize community, family, and faith over individual comfort and technology. This choice has inadvertently made them masters of self-sufficiency. They have been living off-grid for centuries, not as a trend or a weekend hobby, but as the very foundation of their society. Their entire world is built to function without reliance on the complex, fragile systems that the rest of us depend on every single day. This makes them a perfect case study for any prepper focused on a long-term, bug-in strategy. The core of Amish strength is found in their unwavering commitment to community. In an Amish settlement, no family stands alone. When a barn burns down, the entire community gathers to raise a new one in a single day. When a family faces illness or a poor harvest, neighbors step in without being asked, sharing their food, their labor, and their resources. This powerful social fabric is their greatest insurance policy. The Amish homestead is, honestly, a marvel of productivity and self-reliance, a living blueprint for anyone wanting to create a sustainable bug-in location. They are expert farmers who have perfected the art of growing food without relying on chemical fertilizers, pesticides, or heavy gas-guzzling machinery. Instead, they use time-honored techniques like crop rotation, natural pest control, and animal manure to enrich the soil and produce bountiful harvests year after year. They work the land with horse-drawn plows and hand tools, developing a deep, intimate knowledge of the soil and the seasons. Their mastery extends far beyond the fields. Amish families are incredibly skilled in the art of food preservation, which is, a critical skill for surviving through lean times. Nothing from the harvest goes to waste. They spend the late summer and autumn months canning vegetables, pickling cucumbers, drying fruits, and making jams and jellies in vast quantities. Root cellars are a common feature of their homes, providing the perfect, cool, dark environment to store potatoes, carrots, apples, and squash long into the winter. They also practice butchering their own livestock and preserving meat through smoking, curing, and canning. Long before the first pioneers set foot on this continent, it was home to people who possessed a level of survival knowledge that is almost unimaginable today. Native American tribes were the original masters of this land, living in complete harmony with their surroundings for thousands of years. Their survival wasn't about conquering nature or bending it to their will. It was about understanding its rhythms, respecting its power, and living as a part of it. They didn't see the wilderness as a hostile environment to be overcome, but as a provider that offered everything they needed for life. The core of Native American survival wisdom was observation. They were expert trackers, not just of animals, but of the seasons, the weather, and the subtle changes in the landscape. They knew that the flowering of one plant signaled the right time to hunt a certain animal, or that the behavior of insects could predict an approaching storm. This knowledge wasn't learned from a book, it was acquired through a lifetime of patient watching and listening, and it was passed down through stories and hands-on teaching from elders to children. This teaches us that the most important survival tool is not a knife or a fire starter, but a sharp and attentive mind. For Native American tribes, the wilderness was not an empty space between settlements. It was a vast, well-stocked pantry and pharmacy, available to anyone who knew how to read its secrets. Their knowledge of wild edible and medicinal plants was, honestly, encyclopedic. They could walk through a forest and identify dozens of plants that could be used for food, from familiar nuts and berries to the less obvious roots, tubers, and shoots. They knew which plants were safe, which were poisonous, and how to prepare certain ones to make them digestible. This skill transformed the landscape from a place of potential starvation into a source of endless sustenance. This mastery extended to finding and securing protein. They were exceptionally skilled hunters, trackers, and trappers. They didn't just rely on powerful bows or spears, they relied on their profound understanding of animal behavior. They could read tracks in the soil, understand migration patterns, and mimic animal calls to lure in their prey. They developed ingenious traps and snares using natural materials which could work for them while they tended to other tasks. This diverse skill set ensured they could find food in any environment and in any season. When we picture the American cowboy, we often think of a romantic figure riding off into the sunset. But behind this iconic image lies a story of incredible toughness and solitary survival. The life of a 19th century cowboy, especially during the great cattle drives, was one of constant hardship, isolation, and self-reliance. They spent months on end in the saddle, covering vast, often hostile territory with little more than what they could carry. The foundation of the cowboy mindset was a radical sense of personal responsibility. Out on the trail, hundreds of miles from the nearest town, there was no one to call for help. If something broke, you had to fix it. If you got sick or injured, you had to treat it yourself or rely on the limited knowledge of your fellow drovers. This forced them to be resourceful, innovative, and incredibly tough. They couldn't afford to panic or give up when faced with a problem. This self-reliance was paired with a quiet, rugged independence. Cowboys were not antisocial as they worked together on the cattle drive, but their day-to-day existence was often a solitary one. They had to be comfortable with their own company for long stretches of time, finding strength in solitude rather than being weakened by it. This mental toughness is a critical survival asset. Finally, the cowboy possessed an unwavering grit and determination. The work was grueling, the weather was extreme, and the dangers were constant, from stampedes and river crossings to bandits and disease. Giving up was simply not an option. The cowboy was the original master of the bug-out bag. His entire existence was packed into his saddlebags and a bedroll, a minimalist approach born of pure necessity. Every single item he carried had to serve a purpose, and often multiple purposes. There was just no room for luxuries or unnecessary gear. This forced a disciplined and practical way of thinking about what is truly essential for survival on the move. A cowboy's gear was a simple but effective collection of tools for life on the trail. He always carried a sturdy knife, which was essential for everything from eating and making repairs to self-defense. A firearm, typically a revolver, was a constant companion for protection against both two-legged and four-legged threats. Food on the trail was basic and non-perishable. The chuck wagon carried the bulk supplies like flour, beans, bacon, and coffee for the crew, but a cowboy always had his own personal stash for when he was separated from the main group. This typically consisted of jerky, hardtack, or pemmican, foods that were lightweight, high in energy, and could last for a very long time without spoiling. Water was a constant concern, and the cowboy became an expert at managing this precious resource. His canteen was his lifeline, and he knew how to make its contents last. He also learned how to find water in the arid landscapes of the West, reading the terrain for signs of springs or underground seeps. While cowboys mastered life on the move, the pioneers undertook a different kind of journey, one that was arguably the ultimate bug-out. They weren't just traveling through the wilderness, they were traveling to it, with the express purpose of putting down roots and building a new life from nothing. They left behind the established world, packing their entire lives into a covered wagon, and ventured into vast untamed territories. This was not a temporary escape, but a permanent relocation to an off-grid existence. Their story is a powerful testament to human endurance, resourcefulness, and the incredible amount of work it takes to transform a wild piece of land into a functioning, self-sufficient home. The pioneer mindset was a unique blend of optimism and stark realism. They were driven by the dream of a better life, of owning their own land and carving out a future for their families. This powerful vision gave them the motivation to endure unimaginable hardships along the trail. Teamwork was absolutely essential to the pioneer experience, especially within the family unit. Unlike the lone cowboy, the pioneer family operated as a tightly integrated survival team. Every member, from the parents down to the youngest children, had critical roles and responsibilities. The men might be responsible for hunting, clearing land, and heavy construction, while the women managed the garden, preserved food, made clothing, and cared for the sick. Children were tasked with gathering firewood, fetching water, and tending to smaller livestock. Once the pioneers reached their destination, well, the real work began. Their survival depended on an incredibly broad and versatile skill set. A pioneer couldn't afford to be just a farmer or just a carpenter. They had to be a jack of all trades and, in many cases, a master of them all. Their first and most critical task was building a shelter. They started with simple, crude structures like sod houses on the plains or rough log cabins in the woodlands. These initial shelters were built quickly, using only the materials at hand: sod, logs, mud, and stone. With a basic shelter established, their focus turned immediately to food production. The few supplies they brought with them would not last forever. Pioneers had to quickly clear land for a garden, breaking the tough soil with hand plows and sheer determination. They planted hardy crops like corn, beans, and squash, which could provide a reliable food source. They also had to hunt, trap, and fish to supplement their diet while waiting for their first harvest. This combination of agriculture and foraging is a key homesteading strategy. Pioneer women were masters of domestic engineering, responsible for turning the raw materials from the farm and forest into a livable existence. They knew how to make soap from ash and animal fat, and candles from tallow. They could spin wool into yarn and weave it into cloth to make clothing for the entire family. The Great Depression was a different kind of survival test. It wasn't about taming a wild frontier or living off the land in a bug-out scenario. For millions of families, the disaster wasn't in the wilderness. It was in their own towns and cities. The systems they had trusted their entire lives, banks, jobs, stores, and the government, crumbled around them almost overnight. This was a slow-motion collapse, a grinding crisis of scarcity that forced an entire generation to learn how to survive with virtually nothing. The core lesson from this era is the shocking speed at which normalcy can vanish. One day people had jobs, savings in the bank, and food on the table. The next, the factory was closed, the bank was shuttered, and the savings were gone forever. It forced them to redefine wealth. Wealth was no longer what you had in the bank, it was what you could do with your own two hands. It was the ability to grow a small garden, to mend a worn-out pair of shoes, or to fix a broken tool. This period forged a mindset of extreme resourcefulness, summed up in the popular phrase, "Use it up, wear it out, make it do or do without." This was not just a clever saying, it was a daily mantra for survival. In an economy where money had lost its value, people rediscovered older, more resilient ways of getting what they needed. Bartering and trading became commonplace. A mechanic with no paying customers might fix his neighbor's car in exchange for a basket of vegetables from their garden. A woman skilled at sewing might mend clothes for the local butcher in return for a few cuts of meat. This informal economy was built on skills and tangible goods, not cash. Food, the most basic necessity, became a constant struggle and a source of incredible creativity. Families learned to stretch every single meal. A small piece of meat would be used to flavor a large pot of soup or stew that could feed the family for days. They also turned to gardening with a newfound urgency. Any available patch of soil, in backyards, vacant lots, or even window boxes, was cultivated to grow food. These relief gardens were a lifeline for millions. The home became a center of production, not just consumption. With no money to buy new things, families had to make what they needed. Women would take old flour sacks, which were often printed with colorful patterns, and sew them into dresses, shirts, and aprons for their children. Water and energy were used with extreme care because every penny counted. Families would share bathwater to save on heating costs. They would meticulously turn off lights when not in a room and listen to the radio together as a family for entertainment instead of using electricity for multiple devices. While the Great Depression was a time of immense hardship, it also revealed the incredible strength found in family and community bonds. Faced with a common struggle, many people pulled together. Families became tighter units, relying on each other for emotional support and pooling their resources to get by. Extended families often moved in together under one roof to save money, with grandparents, parents, and children all contributing to the household's survival. Neighbors looked out for each other in ways that are less common today. If one family had a bit of extra food, they would share it with a neighbor who had less. People would pool their tools, their knowledge, and their labor. The psychological toll of the Depression was immense, yet people found ways to maintain morale and a sense of normalcy. They found joy in simple, free pleasures. Families would gather around the radio to listen to their favorite shows. Communities held free concerts in the park. People played board games, read library books, and told stories. This focus on simple joys and human connection was essential for mental survival. It prevented despair from taking hold. Ultimately, the generation that lived through the Great Depression emerged with a unique form of resilience. They developed a deep appreciation for simple things, a profound sense of thrift, and an unshakable confidence in their own ability to endure. We have walked a long path through history, visiting 5 incredible groups of survivors who faced challenges most of us can only imagine. We started with the Amish, who showed us that true wealth lies in community, faith, and the mastery of manual skills, creating a bug-in paradise through generations of shared effort. Then we learned from Native American tribes, the original masters of the land, who taught us to see the wilderness not as an enemy, but as a provider, a pharmacy, and a home. We rode alongside the lone cowboy who embodied the spirit of rugged independence, minimalist living, and the mental fortitude required to survive on the move with only what you can carry. From there we journeyed with the pioneers, the ultimate homesteaders, who turned untamed wilderness into a future for their children. Now, as we gather these stories together, we see they are not just 5 separate tales of survival. They are threads in a single, magnificent tapestry of human resilience. These groups, though separated by time and circumstance, all whisper the same fundamental truths. True preparedness is not found in the gear you buy, but in the skills you learn. Real security is not in a bank account, but in the strength of your family and community bonds. The ultimate survival tool is not a rifle or a knife, but a calm, creative, and knowledgeable mind. It is easy to finish reading an essay like this, nod in agreement, and then go back to life as usual, letting the lessons fade like a dream. But the purpose of this journey into the past is not for passive admiration. It is a direct and personal call to action. The world around us feels increasingly fragile, and the wisdom of these great survivors has never been more relevant. The time for simply thinking about preparedness is over. The time for doing, for learning, for building is now. You do not need to sell your home and build a log cabin tomorrow, but you must start taking concrete steps to weave these timeless skills into the fabric of your modern life. Your journey to true resilience begins with a single, simple choice. I challenge you to choose one skill from one of these groups and begin learning it this week. Perhaps you will be inspired by the Great Depression families and start a small container garden on your balcony to learn the basics of growing your own food. Maybe the cowboy's resourcefulness will motivate you to finally learn a few essential knots that can help with 1,000 tasks. Pick one thing, learn it, practice it, master it, then pick another. As you begin this process, I want you to reflect on your own situation. What are your greatest strengths, and where are your biggest vulnerabilities? Are you prepared for a short-term emergency or a long-term collapse? Look at the lessons from these 5 pillars of survival and see how they apply to your specific needs. The Amish and the Depression-era families offer the ultimate guide for sheltering in place. The native tribes and the cowboys provide the masterclass for living on the move. The pioneers bridge the gap, showing us how to make the journey and then build the destination. This knowledge is your power. It is the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you can provide for yourself and your loved ones no matter what the future holds. It is a legacy of strength passed down to us from those who came before. Do not let it be forgotten. I invite you now to share your own thoughts and plans. What lessons resonated most with you? What is the first skill you plan to learn? Let us continue this conversation and learn from each other, building a community of capable, prepared individuals. Your future self and your family will thank you for the journey you start today.